Hey party people, today we're going to be talking about the 95% rule. So what is the 95% rule? It means buying the bike that's appropriate for the trails you ride 95% of the time. That's it. Sounds simple, but it's not. This is the thing we screw up with the most. There may be this one obstacle that's just barely out of our reach, so we buy a 160 mil fork so that we can tackle it now. Even though that's not the right fork for 95% of our riding. I found far more happiness abiding by the 95% rule than abiding by the 5% rule. So why is this so hard for people to follow, and why do I need to make a video about this if it's so intuitive? My wife and I used to live in an Airstream, and we traveled all over the United States and parts of Canada to find all the great riding spots we could. We rode Washington, Oregon, California, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Texas, Tennessee, Virginia, I'm forgetting a whole bunch, Arkansas, Kansas, Kentucky, Missouri. We rode all over the place. And what we learned was the riding is very different in different parts. Some parts it's mostly flat stuff where you can put down 30 miles in a couple hours, no problem. Other places it's super chunky, super steep, super rugged, and the perfect bike for Missouri is not the same as the perfect bike for North Carolina. I can't just recommend a bike without knowing more about where you're from. If you are looking for custom bike recommendations, like what's the right bike for me, I do all of that through my Patreon. Go to patreon.com/hardtailparty, become a patron, and send me messages. That is where I do my bike consulting. Another thing that makes this really hard is that you have to be brutally honest with yourself. We all want to think that we ride double black diamonds all the time and that there are local trails. For some people they are. For me, I have some great double black diamonds here, but 90% of the time I'm not even riding those. I'm riding the blues and the single blacks. And so we need to be real honest with ourselves if we're trying to pick the right bike for what we ride most of the time. So the right bike for a Whistler may not be the right bike for someone in Northern California. And so try really hard to be honest about which trails are closest to you and which trails you actually ride the most. Don't think about the trails you want to ride every day that are 4 hours away, because that's not what you're going to ride most of the time. Pick the bike that's for the trails close to you that you ride the most. Now, I should also mention, hardtails aren't always the right answer. There are trails and riding areas out there where a hardtail is not the right bike for you. Hardtail will fatigue you faster and you will get tired, and they don't handle as well as full suspension in some environments. That being said, hardtails are usually the answer more than people think. Most people get these big 160, 170 mil 29er enduro sleds and then ride them on green and blue trails near their home. But for a lot of people, the right bike was a simple hardtail that's not even that aggressive. If I lived in the Midwest, I'd ride a bike like the Chameleon and just love that thing and ride it everywhere and maybe even single speed it. If I lived in Crested Butte, Colorado, I'd probably get a full suspension and ride that instead of trying to take a hardtail where it doesn't really belong. Keep an open mind, because a lot of people think the harder a trail gets, the more fun it is. Sometimes that's the case, but usually it's not. When the trail's smooth, hardtails make green and boring trails fun again. If you're used to full suspension and you take it out to your local trails and they just feel boring and you're getting bored, try a hardtail. That's what they're meant for. They're meant for these twisty single tracks that aren't super crazy. You can still do jumps and drops and stuff like that on a hardtail, but hardtails make the trail come alive where it would otherwise be boring on a full suspension. I've ridden some green trails that were way more fun than most black diamonds and double black diamonds. So take a look at those trails and consider maybe the right bike is actually something a little bit less capable to make your easy trails a little bit more challenging and exciting. So when you do get a hardtail, don't fall into the trap that more aggressive or slacker or longer is necessarily better. It's not. It depends on your terrain. If your terrain is steep, very steep, if it has lots of drops bigger than this on a slope, a long, aggressive modern bike is going to do wonders for you. If it's mostly flat, meandering, twisting through the forest, a couple steep downhill sections, but mostly twisty, you're not gonna need a modern bike, and it's actually gonna be boring on that stuff. So something that's a little bit snappier and less modern will actually feel more fun in a lot of these trails. Another thing to consider is the sizing. Something with a long, aggressive reach is going to be fun on really steep stuff. If you're in Bellingham, go for it. There's plenty of stuff there to test a really long reach. If you're in the flatlands, you're not going to need as long of a reach because you're not going to be descending stuff where you really need to get over that front. You're just going to be kind of sitting in the neutral position, riding around on the flatter stuff. So pick your sizing as well based off your 95% rule. I like longer, more aggressive bikes because I live here and there's very steep, chunky stuff here. If I lived in Northern California, I would not be going for the longest, slackest bike I could, and I would actually change my sizing. I base my sizing based on the trails I ride, and my bike packing bikes are sized completely different from my aggressive trail bikes because the position I'm in all day in a bike packing bike, I want a shorter reach. I want it to be a little more upright. I want it to be more relaxed and less stress on the body. But I don't take those on super steep stuff or super crazy stuff. When I am on the super steep stuff, I want to be able to get the optimal body position, get over the front, keep that front wheel from pushing out and from bucking me over, and I want a longer wheelbase. So I actually pick different sizes based on the trails I'm riding. Another myth is that more travel is more fun as well. Hardtails have a threshold where you can't just plow through stuff. So if your trails require more than 150 mil travel, you should probably be on a full suspension. And I'd actually love to experiment with and build a 130 mil hardtail that's got really aggressive geometry to see if that does what I need it to do in the really steep stuff, because I don't think I need 150 mil for everything. So running a big choppered bike with a really high fork is not going to be fun in most of the terrain that makes a hardtail fun. The easier, twistier, flowier single track. There are little things you can do to tweak your bikes to make them more exciting on even bland trails. If you're bored with your trails, if you tell all your friends, oh man, all my local trails suck, they're so boring, try a single speed hardtail. And if they're still boring, try a rigid single speed hardtail. Riding a single speed on a green trail is super, super fun. It may not be extreme like something you'd see on Red Bull Rampage, but the fun factor is off the charts. So if you haven't dabbled in that and that's what your trails are 95% of the time, give single speed a look. I'm going to be demoing a single speed bike pretty soon and I cannot wait to share it with you. I'm really excited. There's this pull from marketing and from our egos and from our image that we want to be seen as hardcore riders, and we ride the hard stuff and we're super talented. And we all want that. But if our trails don't warrant that near our house, pick the bike that suits them the best. I promise you will be happier in the long run. Giving up a little bit of ego to have fun when you're out on your rides, that's what it's all about. I'm going to post some of my other educational videos over here and some of my other playlists. Check them out if you want to learn more about hardtails and geometry and what's going on in this crazy new world of mountain biking and how you can benefit from it. Thanks for watching. There's a party in the mountains and you're invited.